Today, I have the honor and privilege of welcoming a truly remarkable guest to our show, Brian Tracy. Brian is a pioneer in the fields of personal and professional success, and his work has helped millions of individuals achieve their dreams, including myself, by the way. His approach to unlocking human potential and fostering success in sales, leadership, goals, and psychology is unparalleled. With a career that spans over 4 decades, Brian has consulted for more than 1,000 companies and addressed more than 5 million people in 5,000 talks and seminars throughout the US, Canada, and 70 other countries worldwide. As a keynote speaker and seminar leader, he has addressed more than 250,000 people each year. Brian is also a prolific author of over 90 books. He has produced more than 300 audio and video learning programs, including the best-selling Psychology of Achievement, which has been translated into more than 28 languages. His entire library is also now available through Audible. We are thrilled to have him here to share his insights on making more money, leveraging opportunities in real estate, and building a legacy of wealth. Brian has also personally inspired me to pursue excellence and has sort of been a behind-the-scenes mentor throughout my life that has helped me achieve a lot of my success. So, Brian, welcome to the Real Estate Wealth Podcast. Did I miss anything?
No, that was great. You wrote it very much the way my wife had written it. So you said it very well. And
There
thank
you
you
go.
for our being here, because it's a real delight. The people that listen to this are the movers and shakers of the future. It's people who are hungry that listen to these and take notes and actually take action on them. The most important thing in our conversation is for people to take notes, write, have a pen in your hand. And what I say is not the most important thing, it's what you think. Because very often you'll have an insight that'll come from our discussion, and write it down. Napoleon Hill used to say, catch the idea and write it down. Catch the idea. So think of the idea like a comet going through your mind. And one idea that you get from this kind of a discussion can change your life forever. But it's no good unless you capture it. You've got to write it down and then think about it afterwards. It's interesting. I've studied super learning, and what I found is that it's not the words themselves, it's the thought and the reflection that goes on between the lines or after the sentencing. It's not what you listen to, it's what you think about afterwards. So our goal is to help our listeners to make more money. We've called this MMM, and you make more money. And the way that you make more money is called SMS, which is sell more stuff. And that turns out to be the primary motivation for most people. They just want to make more money, and the only way they can do it is sell more stuff. And our job is to help them to do this better, faster, easier, and focus on results. So back to you, Ed.
Okay, that's perfect. And I think, a couple things. Sell more stuff. I would say that includes, not only a product, right? Because we're real estate investors, but just being able to sell your ideas, sell your thoughts, sell your influence is very, very important. And you bring up a point of writing down, which, I'm a big proponent of written goals, which I've learned through you. And I think Napoleon Hill also said, you become what you think about, and you say that you become what you think about most of the time. And that's really kind of the critical lesson I think in life is, people can focus on good thoughts or bad thoughts, and whatever you sort of seed your mind with over time, you will become. So Brian, let's talk a little bit about some of the foundational principles of building wealth. I mean, your extensive experience as a motivational speaker and author, what are some of the foundational principles on making money that you believe anyone, regardless of the background, can apply?
Well, one of my favorite phrases or words is hustler.
Mm-hmm.
Successful people are hustlers, Ed, and I mean that in a very positive sense. Is they get up earlier, they work a little harder, they stay longer. For most people who want to become wealthy, they have to work their behinds off for 5 or 10 years. You see the Mark Zuckerbergs and the people who are multi-billionaires before they're 30. this is so rare as to be put out of your mind completely. Is if you're going to be successful, one of the goals I say is set a goal to become a millionaire. Set a goal to become a millionaire. And then the only question you ask is how? How am I going to become a millionaire? So let me give you my story. I started off broke. I was in my 30s and I moved to Edmonton, Alberta because it was growing, because the city was growing because of the oil patch and everything else. And I decided to get into real estate development. And I went to the library. This time there was no internet. And I read 21 books on real estate development written by experts. And I'm always astonished when I say, how many books have you read by people who have actually made a lot of money starting from nothing in real estate? Most people haven't read any. Now you must be out of your mind. How many seminars have you gone to and sat up in the front rows? And how many things have you tried? And it's so important. So anyway, what I did is I went and I decided that the key was to find a piece of real estate and that could be developed, and then to tie it up, and then to raise the money, and then to build something. And what I came up with as I went to city after city, I found a 5-acre piece of property right on the edge of a growing city, and that city needed a shopping center. So I met with the town manager. I met with the town councilman, and put together a deal. And I didn't have any money, so I spoke to them. The owners were two farm people who had bought the property many years before. And they said, well, you have to talk to our lawyer. And I still remember that. I said, is that with the lawyer? And the lawyer said, these people have got to sell this property, and it's too much burden for them. And I'll tell you what, if you can raise the funds, I will allow you to tie up the property for 30 days. And I still remember that. And I said, well, I don't have any money. He said, can you give me a check for $150? This was a $5 million purchase. Can you give me a check for $150? And I said, as long as you promise not to count, yeah, because I didn't have 100. He said, okay. And I went out, and I tell you, like a running in a race, I went to every single real estate development company within 1,000 miles and literally begged them for the money. And I finally found one. And it's the most amazing darn thing is that if you really work hard and just keep working and do not be put off by people who say no, if I eventually found a company, and the company was in real estate development, quite successful. And they said, well, if everything you say about the potential for the development of this as a shopping center is true, then we'll put up 3/4 of the money in exchange. We'll put up 100% of the money in exchange for 3/4 of the shopping center. And that changed my life forever. I said,
Wow.
okay. And I went out and I hustled 7 days a week. I got a Safeway, major restaurant. I literally got the entire seminar or shopping center built. I found developers. I found architects. I got built. I put it all together, and my goal was to open it on January 1st of the following year, and I did. And the owner of the property, the owner of the company, attended with a lot of people. It was a big deal. And he said to me, he said, how would you like to come to work for me? And that was a great, great change in my life. And I said, how would it work? And so we worked out a modus vivendi, a way of living. And what he did is I went to work for him, except that I was independent. And he gave me properties and to develop. He gave me properties that his company had bought, and he enabled me to get the properties annexed to the cities, which dramatically increases the property. And because I was working with him and he was very well known, um, people would take my calls, which is the best thing in business. People take your call, as you know what I mean. And I began to develop properties and real estate, and I developed an office building in downtown Vancouver, which is 800 miles away. And And I just had opportunity after opportunity. I went to Mexico and bought and sold a piece of property for him. I went to Palm Springs. I did the same thing. And I made him an enormous amount of money, but he paid me on commission. Basically, he said, I will give you this share of the profits if you could put this deal together. And
Mm-hmm.
so I work basically on performance,
Mm-hmm.
100% performance, and it worked out wonderfully well. So as I mentioned to you before we got on here, I developed over the course of several years about $500 million worth of real estate. And then
Yeah.
I moved to San Diego and I started to get into real estate development. I developed 2 or 3 or 4 different residential subdivisions. I developed an entire self-storage business with 300 units. And it just sort of kept capitalizing on my previous experience. And I made a
Mm-hmm.
lot of mistakes. I'll just say 2 things with regard to that, and then we can go on. The biggest mistake I ever made, which I'll pass on, is my failure to do proper due diligence. The words due diligence are the most important words you'll learn if you're in real estate development, because due diligence means you check everything. Assume that people are not lying to you, they're just simply not telling you the whole truth. And so do your research, do your homework, check and double check. Never accept anything on faith. You've got to be really, really tough. My my patron, if you like, my boss taught me this one thing. He said that it's easy to get into something, but it's very hard to get out of it afterwards. So
Mm-hmm.
the time that you do your thinking, the time that you do your planning and organize it is before you commit irrevocably money, time, and so on. And so therefore I learned it from him, and I still made mistakes, but I learned from every mistake. Here's an idea for you if you're in real estate, is you've all made mistakes. We all make mistakes. That's how we learn. Jeff Bezos, who became the richest man in the world in 2018, and now, God bless him, he's only number 3 richest person. But what he found was he had to borrow money from his parents to start up this little book deal, which became Amazon. He picked the word Amazon because Amazon is the biggest river in the world. And he had this idea that he'd make the biggest online sales company. And what he said always is that we never make mistakes. We just have learning experiences. And there's nothing wrong with making mistakes, but if you don't learn from them, it's just really dumb. So therefore, always be open to the possibility that you could be wrong. Say, what if I was wrong in this decision? Obviously, there's problems here. What if I was completely wrong? And be willing to walk away completely from a bad deal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the piece of advice I will give you that made me a lot of money. And it was this, is every time you make a mistake, sit down, as you talked about in writing, and write down, what did I learn from this situation? And write it down, and force yourself to come up with at least 20 lessons that you learned. And I learned this from people who started with nothing and became multimillionaires. Is they every single time they made a mistake, they say, stop the clock, time out. And they would sit down and go into their minds and work out every lesson that they learned. And then every time they went into a new deal, they'd review their lessons. They'd have a lesson book or a lesson spiral notebook that will make you rich. It is so important. You see, most people, unfortunately, are lazy and they don't do anything that they don't have to do. But successful people are also lazy, however, they realize that if they can identify all the lessons that they learned, as Jeff Bezos did, that's the whole philosophy of Amazon, is that we will make all kinds of mistakes, but we will take the time to learn from each mistake. And you can't knock being the richest person in the history of the world because they have a particular philosophy, which was to learn from every mistake they made. So what I teach people is there are no such thing as mistakes. There are only learning experiences. And
Right.
there are cheap learning experiences and expensive learning and painful learning experiences.
That is true.
But
That
it's
is
true. And
that is
everybody,
absolutely true.
yes. And so what you want to do is you want to be a model for other people. Best thing you can do with your children. When my children make a mistake, and all kids get into stuff, I say they get into stuff, I'd sit them down and I'd say, all right, what did you do? And they would tell me. I say, and what did you learn? What did you learn from this experience? And we would go through it. We'll talk it through, sort of like a post-mortem. And then the
Mhm.
last question I was asked, what are you going to do differently next time? And we would talk about it. And that's how I raised my children. And all of my children are positive, they're optimistic, they've got good grades, they're hardworking, because every single time they stumbled, we saw it as a learning experience. No criticism, no punishment, nothing. Just what did you do right, and what would you do differently next time? And these are the critical things for success.
Yeah, I think
And
what you're
today,
saying, Brian, is it's really, successful people sort of have the ability to self-reflect, right? Which a lot of
yes,
people do not. And in that self-reflection, you can uncover gold oftentimes that will
yes,
prevent you from making that mistake in the future. Because I think, by nature, humans kind of have short-term memories, right? And most people try to be positive and they have short-term memory and they forget the painful past, if you will. But I like your idea. And we'll, if we make mistakes here at the company, oftentimes we'll do sort of a post-mortem review. But I like your idea of writing down 20 things you learned. That's pretty good, right? Usually you have 3 or 5 things you think you learned. But if you force yourself to say,
yes,
gosh, there are 20 things, what would they be?
yes.
I think that could be invaluable.
You remind me of a story. I went to a fishing camp, and these fishing camps you fly in with a couple of friends, and they have other people there. And this fishing camp was actually on a boat, so the plane would fly into this fishing area, and then you transfer to the boat, and you go from the boat. You'd go out and fish every day. So these are not poor people that go to this type of fishing camp.
Right.
So I remember going. And then you'd have dinner at night. They had cooks and good food and wine and everything else. So we'd have dinner each night, and we sit around the table. These all these well off and successful business people, and I just listened to their conversation. And you know what? Not one of them talked about how successful they were. You knew they were successful because they couldn't be here otherwise. All they talked about was the mistakes they'd made and the lessons they'd learned. And they were doing one-upmanship. Hey, you had that mistake, you lost this and everything else. Let me tell you what I did. and and they went around, and it was just sort of one up the mistakes they made and the things they learned from them that made them wealthy. And it's very interesting. That's how successful people are. They don't say, "Oh, I did this and I accomplished that." They said, "Boy, did I ever learn a good lesson here." Or I remember I tried this once and I forgot to ask about this or that. And it was just fascinating. I just sat there basically and listened. And and so you find the same thing, that successful people think mostly about the lessons that they've learned, because they're always thinking, as my mentor once said, is don't repeat the mistake. Is if you're going to make a mistake, that's fine, but learn everything that you can from it. The 20 idea method, by the way, which you've heard me talk about in other contexts, the 20 idea method will make you rich.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I like the one upsmanship on the failures, right?
Yes.
Um, that's really telling, actually. And it makes sense. I mean, successful people know they're going to have failures along the way, right?
Yeah.
And people that are afraid to fail never try anything to become successful. So it's kind of a little catch 22, if you will, right?
Right.
Hey, Brian, let's talk a little bit about success habits. What
Yeah.
habits have you observed over the years with entrepreneurs and real estate investors specifically that you think significantly contribute to the ability or their ability to make money? I mean, we talked about the ability to recognize failures and mistakes is one, right?
Right. Well,
What are some other habits that you see that you would advise people to sort of cultivate?
it's interesting. I'm just looking to the side here. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called the Secret Habits of the Super Rich. And what it is was based in summarizing a whole bunch of research that I'd done, where it says these are the habits of the super rich.
Mhm.
These are the people who started with nothing, and we accumulated a lot of money. And they're very simple habits. Number one, and I usually give a little 7-part way to become rich. I used to think, how could I double my income? And then how could I double it again? And then I read Einstein's uh, contribution. He said that the greatest power in the universe is compounding. The greatest power is compounding. And what he meant was that compound interest, if you let it accumulate long enough, it becomes an enormous amount of money. And real estate especially, a good piece of real estate properly chosen, properly managed, becomes more and more valuable. My home today is worth about 6 times what I paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
Home, right, and it's been 30 years since I moved into the home, but now it's extremely valuable just because of compounding. So anyway, one of the things that we found was that um, successful people get up early. Successful people get up early, and they get up before 6 a.m. And when I learned that from the research that had been done, that I basically set my clock so I would wake up at 5 minutes to 6 every morning, and then I would go down and jump in my swimming pool. Because once you do that, boy, you are not going back to bed. So I'd throw myself in, throw
Oh, wow.
myself.
So you were an early pioneer of the cold plunge. That's very
Yeah,
popular today, right?
yes,
You had
that's
your own
right.
cold plunge going on.
And so if you get up in the morning and immediately exercise, do something, then you're awake. So I developed a simple 7-step method to become rich. And I'll give it to you because I've had people come up to me over and over again and said, that 7-step method changed my life forever. One of the most common things I hear all over the world was, you changed my life, Brian, you made me rich. You changed my life. You made me rich. I struggled for year after year after year. Then I began to do what you recommended, and today I'm rich.
Mm-hmm.
I had a man stand up in one of my seminars, and he said, when I met this man, he said, I was broke. I was 18 years old. He said, 6 years later, I was a millionaire. He said, he changed my life. He said, today I'm 35 years old, and I have more money than I could ever spend for the rest of my life because of what he told me to do. So I'm going to give you the 7 things that a person can do, and it's based on compounding. And compounding, what you say is that if you could increase your income by 25% per year by becoming more productive, becoming more thoughtful, upgrading your skills, working harder, managing your time, and so on. If you could 25% per year, all you'd have to do is increase your productivity by 2% per month. 2% per month. I'm sorry. Yeah, 2% per month.
Right.
That's one half of 1% per week. 2% per month, 25% per year. All right. Now, so here's how you do that. Number one, and by the way, because of compounding, this will change your life. This will be worth all the shows that you ever do for all the people that you do it for, because it works always, everywhere, for everyone. One of the rules, by the way, is that the first million is hard, but the second million is inevitable. The first million is hard, but the second million is inevitable. And why is that? It's because you have to learn so much. And as my friend Jim Rohn used to say, he said, you have to become a different person. You have to become a different person to earn your first million. You have to become disciplined and focused and persistent, and you have to work hard and have to examine everything you do. It takes a long time to develop that way of making money. But once it is developed, if you lost everything in a major cataclysm of some kind, you earn it all back very quickly. Why? Because now you are a millionaire on the inside. Once you become a millionaire on the inside, if you lose it all, you just make it all back again. It may have taken you 10 years to become a millionaire, but now it may take you 10 months to come back from nothing. That's why you see people who are billionaires and lose all their money in a crash, and 2 years later, they're billionaires again.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because they're billionaires on the inside. So
Right.
number one is get up before 6 a.m. each morning. Is go to bed early, turn off your television set, be rested, but go to bed early and get up before 6 a.m. Number two is exercise immediately when you get up. That's not not a separate idea. But number two is to write and rewrite your goals every morning. Every morning, write and rewrite your goals, because you want to program them deep into your mind so that they take on a power of their own. Now, and I call it the 10 goal method. Get yourself a spiral notebook, as you talked about, and write down your 10 goals in the present tense every morning without looking back at what you wrote yesterday. So you write your goals from memory every morning. It's almost like starting up an outboard engine, run, run, and suddenly your mind is just racing with ideas. Step number three is to plan every day in advance. Plan every day in advance. As you're planning in advance, and here's the technique that is a life changer, is make a list of everything you have to do today, and then look at your list and say, if I could only do one thing on this list, which one action would have the greatest positive impact on my life? If I could do just one thing. Now, what we have found, and I've trained more than 1,000 business owners in my coaching programs, is that there is a law of three. My new book, which is coming out in June, talks about this law of three, among other laws. And it basically says that if you make a list of everything you do, 10, 20 things, three of them account for 90% of the value of everything you do. Three activities account for 90%. Now, why do people succeed? It's because they discipline themselves to work on the big three. Why do people fail? It's because what they do is they do what's fun and what's easy and talk to their friends and check on the internet. They waste their time hour after hour, and then they keep putting it off till tomorrow and next week. No. What you have to do is you have to say, what are my big three? If I can only do one, if I can only do two, if I can only do three, what are they? And everything else is accounts for 10% of everything that you do. So focus on the big three and focus on the 90%. Number four is read. I'm sorry, three is to read for at least 1 hour every day.
No, four, I think, is read. Plan your day, read would be four. I'm writing them down here. Sorry.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Read every day in something that is educational, motivational, or inspirational. Read something that turns you on. And here's a rule with regard to reading. I used to teach accelerated learning and super learning and speed reading. And one of the things you find is the best way to save time in reading a book is to throw it away. And the reason I say this is that if a book doesn't grab you when you read the first few pages, if it doesn't force you, it doesn't attract you, you want to get back to it. You carry it around with you. You read it all the time. If it doesn't have that effect on you, chuck it, because you won't remember a word of a book that doesn't grab you. I love the expression is, did the book grab you? Did the idea grab you? If it doesn't grab you, accept that it's not the right one for you and move on. So read something that you like and enjoy. One of the things that I do is I always ask people like yourself, if you could recommend one book right now, which one book do you think would be the most helpful for me? And so I'm going to ask you that question. What would be your most helpful book?
For me, I mean, I think as a general statement, I think Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, is still probably one of the most powerful books ever written, and I highly recommend it. And for anyone who hasn't read it, it's just a foundational Bible in studying success, in my opinion.
You're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, that was my experience when I was a young man, 21, 22. Somebody gave me the book and I read it from cover to cover, and I read it on a regular basis. Now, here's something interesting. HarperCollins, one of the biggest publishers in New York, called me up a few months ago and said, we are bringing out a new version of Think and Grow Rich, and we'd like you to write the introduction.
Fantastic.
And that was a chance. So the book is now out. It has my name on the front cover. So the book that had the great influence on me and you when we were younger, I now have been become so successful that they asked me to write the
and I now have become successful that you're on my podcast. So there you go. Life goes in full circle, right?
Yeah. And if you read an hour a day, and read always with a red pen. My kids joke with me because I always have a red pen and a blue pen. Blue pen to write, red pen to underline. And when I was younger, what I would do, because we didn't have the internet or anything else, what I would do is I would read the book and underline, and then I would take out, I still have it here, I would take out my various spiral notebooks, and I would go through the book and I'd write every key idea. And then I'd review all the key ideas. So eventually I internalized about 80% of the very best books. Just because remember, it's not enough just to read it. You have to internalize it so that those ideas are at the tip of your tongue. They're at the front part of your mind. So read an hour a day. An hour a day will translate into roughly one book per week. One book per week will translate into 50 books a year. The average adult in our society reads 1 or 2 nonfiction books a year, but the top people read 50 a year. If you just read it a day, you get the equivalent of a full-time university attendance for a whole career. Bill Gates, who is one of the richest people in the world, I think number 5 or number 6, Bill Gates reads two business books a week and takes notes and writes out the notes. And you can actually go on. He said, come to my website and you can take a look at my underlinings, what I consider was important in the book. Imagine the richest guy in the world. He's a busy guy. He's one of the richest guys in the world. He reads 2 books a week. And so people say, well, I don't have time to read. Are you out of your mind? Sometimes one idea in one book will save you 10 years of hard work. It's the most amazing thing.
Right. It's similar to people saying, I don't have time to exercise. Are you out of your mind as well? Right. It's the mind and the body that both need to be super fit.
So number 1, get up early. Number 2 is write and rewrite your goals. Number 3 is read for 1 hour or more each morning. Number 4 is to plan every day in advance. This alone will make you rich. As actually talked about it. Write everything you have to do and pick the big 3 and start with number 1, and then discipline yourself. And this is the key. It's a special on Netflix right now about Alexander the Great, who I studied for years and years and years. By the time he was 33, he had conquered the known world. Unbelievable. He had a sense for battle that was unbelievable. And you know what his number 1 success quality was self-discipline. Not only was he extremely disciplined himself, but his soldiers were extremely disciplined, and they literally pulverized every army they ever fought against because of their ability to discipline, to follow orders, to follow instructions. And anyway, so self-discipline is the most important thing of all, and that means time management. If you cannot manage your time, they say you can't manage anything. And think about that. So I wrote a book called Eat That Frog, which you're probably familiar with.
I am.
That book has sold 5 million copies in 55 languages.
Wow.
And more people say, that book changed my life, it made me rich. Changed my life, it made me rich. And the summary of it is 21 ideas in the book, but the main idea is for you to discipline yourself, to select your most important task, and then focus single-mindedly on doing that before you do anything else. It seems like a simple concept, but 90% of the population don't have it. They don't.
And the eat the frog metaphor, Brian, and you can explain it better than me, obviously, but it's really has to do with tackling the most difficult task first thing in the morning, right? Eat that frog, which nobody would want to do. And I think you say did Mark Twain come up with that, or? But it's really a metaphor for sort of tackling the hardest, most important thing on your list, which, like you said, if you can do that one task, oftentimes, call it the 90-10 principle, the 80-20 principle, the 1 or 2 things you could do will really accomplish 80 or 9% of what you're trying to get done. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. What Mark Twain said is, if the first thing you do in the morning is you eat a live frog, the satisfaction of knowing that's probably the worst thing that's going to happen to you all day long. And then there's two corollaries to that. He says, if you have to eat a frog, do an important test. Don't sit and look at it for too long. Just get on with it. And number two, he said, corollary, if you have two frogs to eat the ugliest one first. And your frog is your biggest and most important task, and the one that at the beginning you're the most likely to procrastinate on, most likely to put off. So get in the habit of getting up in the morning and starting, as my friend Bob Allen says, do the worst first. Do the worst first. Do the one that you're most likely to put off first until you develop a habit. And here's the most wonderful thing is when you start and complete your most important task, you get a tremendous feeling of happiness. There was a wonderful psychologist in the last century. His name was William Glasser. And William Glasser studied behavioral psychology. And he wrote a book called, it could be called Positive Addiction. Positive addiction. He said that every time you do something of any kind, is you get a flush of chemicals in your brain.
Endorphins.
And endorphins, yes. But it was endorphins, dopamine,
Dopamine, right? Yep.
Yep. So if you do something important, you get a flood of positive chemicals, which makes you feel happy. And not only that, if you keep taking and doing most important things, you start to develop an addiction. You become addicted to starting and completing important tasks. Once you have that addiction, you can hardly wait to get up and get going on your important task. You don't look for excuses. You can hardly wait to do it. And what happens is it becomes more and more automatic, is that you're always doing and getting better at your most important task. So something to think of positive addiction, and what like endorphins and dopamine are chemicals, and they actually make you addicted in a very positive way. You can develop a positive addiction that will virtually guarantee your success in life. It's a wonderful thing. Another subject. But anyway, so number four.
Hey, Brian, not to interrupt, but I would bet on some of those brisk Southern California mornings when you ran outside and saw your swimming pool there, that was probably 60 degrees. That might have been your giant, ugly frog that you immediately didn't think too much about, but jumped right in, right?
That's right. And my kids do it too now. They're growing up. Number five is plan every day in advance, set priorities. Number six is to listen to audio programs in your car. Listen to audio programs in your car. Is turn driving time into learning time. Turn your car into a university on wheels. The average person in business who's traveling, driving around, spends about 2 to 3 hours a day in their car. If you were just to listen to really great programs, and Audible, for example, has the very best programs in the history of the world, including mine.
Yes.
But anything that you ever want to learn is available on Audible at a low price and almost instantly. So therefore, listen to audio programs. If you listen to audio programs 2 to 3 hours a day, you will be getting a full-time university degree every single year. It's amazing. And one idea can change your life. And the challenge is you don't know what idea it is. You don't know what ideas. So you have to be open to ideas coming from everywhere. Now, I think the most important thing is to treat everybody like $1 million customer. Treat everybody like $1 million customer. And it's the most wonderful thing to treat people, starting with your family in the morning, with your staff. You treat everybody like they're valuable and important people. And this has a double effect. First of all, it makes you feel good about yourself to treat others well. It makes them feel good about themselves, and they're committed to you and helping you and so on. So treat everybody like they're really valuable and important. There's Dale Carnegie used to say that the greatest desire of all of human beings just to feel important and valuable, to be respected. So therefore, treat other people like that, and you'll be astonished at how they will respond to you. So now, if you do these things, then what is going to happen is that you are going to increase your productivity by 2% a week. Actually, you can increase your productivity far more than that. But let's just talk about what we call the law of incremental improvement. That means you don't become fantastic overnight. You just get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, and you get into the rhythm of it, and you feel happier and more positive. You feel a tremendous sense of self-control, of being in charge of your life. So 2% per week, 25% per year. In 2 years and 7 months, you'll double your income because of compounding. If you keep on doing it, at the end of 10 years, you'll have increased your income 10 times. And I remember this really neat guy who'd been to my seminar came up to me and he said, Brian, he said, I've been using your method ever since I learned it from you. He said, doesn't work. Doesn't work. I said, what do you mean? His name is Chris. What do you mean, Chris? He said, only took me 6 years. He said, I'm earning 10 times what I was earning 6 years ago. He said, I've never earned so much money in my whole life. I have a beautiful house, a wonderful life for my family, and so on. He said, I just follow it every day. I breathe in, I breathe out, I follow your 7 steps. And what happens is the more you do it, the faster it works. It doesn't really take 10 years for you to increase your income 10 times. It takes 5 or 6. Well, for me, when I started to use this simple method and I started to teach it, it's this law of incremental improvement. It works for everybody, everywhere, at all times, as long as you do it every day. Well, what happened was I increased my income 10 times in 5 years, and then 10 times more in 5 more years. And I went from struggling to being a millionaire for the first time. And it's amazing. And everybody else that does it says the same thing. You changed my life. You made me rich. I just did that every day, every day. A great challenge. And I remember I worked with Rich DeVos, who founded Amway Corporation. He said that the number one characteristic of successful people is persistence. And another writer wrote, persistence is self-discipline in action. And in other words, you make a decision that you're never going to quit. I told my kids when they were growing up, I said, you know, I know something about you. This is 10 years old, 11 years old. I know something about you is you never give up. You never quit. You never give up. Oh, Dad, sure I do. I have all kinds of. I said, no, you may think that you do, but I'm your father and I know better. You never give up. And then now they're adults and they say, well, I know one thing about myself is I never give up because I programmed them like a computer. I programmed when they were young and told them over and over again, you never give up. You never give up. You never give up. And they don't. They don't. They will try something new or different, but they cannot imagine giving up. And it's a wonderful thing is when you have programmed yourself so that you know you never give up. You may try something different, but you'll never quit. You just feel happy all the time. You just feel happy about yourself and you just bounce back all the time. And if you want to become a millionaire or a multimillionaire, remember the first million is the hardest. It's really hard because you have to basically reprogram yourself so that you do these things. Is you get up early, you read, you plan your day, you organize and set priorities, you focus on the most valuable use of your time. These are things that all successful and wealthy people do. And they're all learnable skills. So each of our friends who is listening to this, I hope they value these very simple principles. People say, well, that's not, there's no deep scientific, profound insight. No, all the success principles are very simple. All you have to do is do them until they become habits.
Yeah, you know, I think that's correct. And I think I love your analogy of compound interest. And I remember reading about Warren Buffett once, and he, you know, from a financial sense, he is completely obsessed with compound interest to the point where, you know, we've all heard the stories where he goes to McDonald's and he pays $2.37 exactly every day, whatever it is. But he thinks about, okay, if I spent, you know, an extra 50 cents or $1 or $3, you know, compounded over my life, that will be worth tens or hundreds of thousands. And I literally think he thinks that way about every dollar he spends, which is why he's so frugal. But it's really interesting. And the power of compounding is it's exponential, right? Whether it's financial or, you know, learning or anything else, it's like building a muscle. It builds upon itself and really becomes over time, I think, exponential.
And,
Um,
and
it is.
there's one other thing, Ed, is that you can compound your knowledge. Is you
Mhm.
can start off with a little bit of knowledge and just keep learning and growing and taking notes and asking people for their advice and so on. I remember I was asked, I was talking to a group of people at a seminar. I said, "What books would you recommend?" And every one of them had a recommendation. And what I do when a person I like recommends a book, I just immediately buy it. I just pick up my cell phone, uh, kick into Amazon, and buy it. And sometimes it's delivered the same day. It's the
Mhm.
most amazing darn thing. And sometimes the insights that I get from those books trigger another book, which trigger a seminar, so you can actually compound your knowledge as well by just continue to learn, and uh, and you'll find that this piece of knowledge combined with this piece of knowledge come together with this piece of knowledge, and you can make another 1,000, 100,000, maybe even $1 million. When I developed my first shopping center, I didn't have any money, but they gave me 25, they put up all the money and I had 25%. So I developed the shopping center. I borrowed money to stay alive and so on. And at the end of it, I sold my quarter interest back to my developer friends, and they paid me several $100,000 for my share. And it changed my life forever.
Mhm.
Buying a house and a car and travel and getting married and having children and wonderful things. And then because I've been successful, people would come to me and say, "I have an opportunity. Would you like to take care of it? Or would you like to develop this piece of property or annex this property and divide it into 160 lots?" I mean, it was just a wonderful thing, but it just comes from just continue to learn and grow and try new things, manage your time well. And everybody who is interested in real estate here, real estate has always been one of the most wonderful investments of all. However,
Mhm.
lots of people lose their shirts in real estate because they don't do their homework. They don't do their homework.
Yep. No, I agree with you. Due diligence. I mean, we have when we buy an apartment building here, we have a checklist with over 100 items that we thoroughly go through as part of our due diligence, like you spoke about earlier, which
That's
is critically important. And even doing that, sometimes you can make a mistake, right, or uncover something after the fact
yes,
that you need to deal with. But it is absolutely critical to, like you said, do your homework ahead of time. There's no question. But I joke about real estate as a get rich slow scheme, right? Like when I started this company, we started doing some private money lending, but then there was an opportunity to buy apartments at a big discount in 2008 when I started CalCap.
yes,
And so I said, well, geez, I don't know how it's going to work, but let's just take a long time horizon here. And I called it the get rich slow scheme, which oftentimes it is,
yes,
but it always works. I feel like if you have a long enough time horizon in real estate, right? If your horizon's only 3 years or 5 years, you might get caught in a cycle and
yes.
lose your shirt. But if you have a long time horizon, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, it's a get rich slow scheme that pretty much always works.
Yes, and I've spoken to so many successful real estate, first of all, entrepreneurs and then business owners, and they buy and never sell.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
buy and hold, and they
Yep.
never sell.
Very smart. I think that's very smart.
Yeah, and they make much better decisions if they're thinking about owning the property forever or for 10 years. Much better decisions. They're much more thoughtful about the little details. And so you'll find exactly what you said, get rich slow. If you get rich slow, then it's permanent. And you'll find that all the wealthy people in history are people who very carefully purchased property or assets and then just held on to them, like Warren Buffett.
Yep.
Wonderful example.